introduce our speaker. So Jim Page is the Senior Fisheries Biologist and Aquatic Nuisance Species Coordinator for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and he leads statewide efforts to monitor and manage fish populations and serves as the project leader for invasive catfish removal in the Satilla River. In his role, he coordinates rapid response to invasive species sightings and leads outreach initiatives to help Georgia communities prevent the introduction of harmful aquatic organisms. And then he also serves as a secretary for the Gulf and South Atlantic Regional Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species, or GSARP, and as a past president of the Georgia chapter of the American Fisheries Society. And so I am going to hand it over to Jim and let him tell us more about his work.
All right. Thank you, Kayla. I'm going to assume you guys can see the screen. Tell me if you can't.
Yes,
good?
I good on my end. So anybody, if you can't see it, drop in the comments.
Excellent. So again, thank you, Kayla, and I appreciate you guys having me today. It's always an honor to get to speak and talk about some of the stuff we've got going on here in Georgia. As Kayla said, so I am Jim Page, and one of the many hats I get to wear is serving as our Aquatic Nuisance Species, or ANS, coordinator for the state. And kind of where I'll talk about in the beginning is kind of what that means structurally and responsibility wise. But again, do appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you guys. If we get this advance. Are you advanced? No, you're not advancing on your end, are you?
Mm-mm. See if you hit the space bar.
That's what I tried. It worked earlier, but it's not working now.
Maybe the over button?
Did the right arrow, space bar. We just did the
yeah, we just made sure. Let me make sure it's not something that I've done.
All right, I'll just do it manually this way. So I figured out another way. All right, so my apologies. I am not the most technological person, so my apologies there. But what I wanted to do with this talk really and truly was start off by kind of giving you guys a little bit of an insight as to who we are here at DNR, Georgia DNR. Kind of for our ANS program, give you a little overview, a little short intro, so to speak, as to how we're set up structurally, as well as kind of give you an idea of what some of our goals and objectives are with this particular program we've got. There's really three areas of focus that our program really tries to hone in and dial in on. That's planning, prevention, and response. And that's kind of where we'll spend most of our time talking today, is what those three areas look like, kind of how we develop them, how we implement them, and then how we go forth with trying to minimize the impacts of ANS, and most importantly, try to prevent ANS in this state. So looking at our program overview, so you guys are obviously probably familiar with ANS or AIS, Aquatic Invasive, Aquatic Nuisance, whatever terminology you so choose to use. But that ANS is an issue that's statewide, or excuse me, not statewide, it's nationwide rather, actually global in many ways. But certainly it's been a problem in Georgia and states around us for many, many years. And continues to grow. And we continue to see more and more species that get introduced, get brought in, and become more problematic as that occurs. So you guys that have ever been out west before, you've probably seen many states out west are really set up structurally a little bit different than we are. A lot of your states in Montana, your western states that have these really big programs where they've got a lot of funds and funding set aside to really have large scale ANS programs. That's kind of the pipe dream of where we'd like to be. You know, we would love to have roadside stands or roadside ability to be able to stop people and check out trailers and check out all kinds of different things that people are towing or taking down the road, in addition to all the other program things they've got going on. But for us, that's just not where we are at this point. Structurally, we're actually still very small. We hope to get to the western states at some point, but for now, essentially we're a one-man team in many ways that relies on really and truly a lot of different people to take it beyond just what that one man can do. So like I said earlier, I carry that role or that responsibility of being our ANS or AIS coordinator. But again, what that really entails is me relying on people around me. I can't be around the state collectively at one time. I can't serve the entire state physically, so I have to rely on a lot of the folks within our agency and a lot of our partner agencies as well, and really make this truly a team effort in order for us to be able to really tackle and address ANS in the state. So we partner with a lot of different folks. Some of those are internal within our department. So within Georgia DNR, we've got several divisions, folks at our Wildlife Resources Division, our Coastal Resource Division, of course, law enforcement, our parks, and different divisions within DNR. I rely on their help a lot because, again, they're scattered throughout the state. And so I'm able to call on them and kind of get some of their help when we do have issues come up and we do have needs to respond. I can first and foremost call on them to help. But also we've got several regional and federal partners as well. Fish and Wildlife Service certainly has been a great partner for us, as has USGS. That's where I actually knew Kayla from initially. But it's truly through these partnerships that we're able to really reach out and get a lot of the work done that we're able to do and really report and get the word out on a lot of the stuff we're doing and finding on a much bigger scale. And then, of course, we've also got several local entities. So we've got a lot of cities and counties that work with us. Again, that in some cases can provide volunteers, can provide help for us on the ground, but if not, they can give us some logistical help in terms of getting us in touch with private property owners who are having issues or things like that. And then collectively, when you look at our goals, really, I think it kind of narrows down to a real simple goal, and that is to work with these different partners that we have, these local, these state, these federal agencies, and of course the general public at large. I mean, that's our biggest partner in many ways because that's the bulk of our eyes in the field, and collectively working together to address ANS in Georgia. And we do that through really engaging in three different things, and that's planning, prevention, and response. And that's kind of what we're going to focus in and kind of hone in and talk about here for the next little bit. So let's talk about planning first off. So you guys already know this. This is nothing shattering or new necessarily, but structurally, the foundation for any program, for any project, for any effort, it begins with a plan, right? You always have to have a plan if you really want to go anywhere or take something anywhere and actually have some ability to do something with it. So for us, that plan is our Georgia ANS or Aquatic Nuisance Species Management Plan. And that's a document that's a living, breathing document. We continuously update it. We continuously review it, try to make it better. And that was developed by us both internally here at DNR, as well as, again, with several of our state partners initially. And we continue to, like I said, update that and continue to bring those partners in and figure out ways that we can make it better, we can make it more current. The goal of that plan is to identify, prioritize, prevent, and control ANS. So again, it's designed to really address and focus in on and kind of put some parameters around how we can, know what ANS is within the state, what those invasive species issues are, how we can prioritize them, and then how we can move forward and first and foremost preventing them, but then also controlling them if they're already here. The plan has 8 clear objectives, which I've listed there. First one's coordinate local and state, regional, federal, and international ANS activities. So again, it also comes back to coordination, and that's a big part of what my job is. Prevent, control, and manage ANS through education and outreach. I'll talk about that one a good bit because that's a really big part of what I do and what our focal effort is right now, first and foremost. Third will be prevent the establishment of ANS populations in Georgia via early detection and rapid response. I'll give you some examples here in a little while of some of those rapid response that we've done that we were able to successfully, in some cases, either control or in some cases eradicate some of these introductions that were reported to us. The fourth one there is control or eradicate. So that's the action. That's the actual taking boots to the ground, established ANS in Georgia through cooperative management activities. 5 is monitor the distribution and impacts of ANS in Georgia. 6 is identify and implement needed ANS research, which there's continual ongoing needs there. And that's something that we continue to try to work with our academic partners as well, various universities, to try to help bring in some of their expertise and have them partner with us. 7, prevent ANS introduction and spread via legislative or regulatory efforts. I'll talk about that one actually in just a little bit. And then 8, secure long-term funding for ANS programs in Georgia. So that's kind of the broad 10,000-foot view, if you will, from a management plan perspective. So that's kind of again, the plan, living, breathing document that we're using to kind of hone us in on which direction we want to go, how we want to deal with these ANS topics as they arise. And then that guides us as we start to put boots on the ground. So additional planning that we do, in addition to our state ANS plan, is we also have response plans that we've developed. Now, these are, as you can see an example of there for Asian carp, these are species specific. So these are plans that we actually write internally for high priority species like Asian carp, that really and truly the goal of these plans is really to give us first and foremost some information about the species life history, kind of brings folks up to speed on some of the known life history characteristics of that particular species, which is important as we begin to try to battle it. And then also equally important, it gives us information on our regulatory authority for that species. So depending on the species, Georgia rules or regulations may allow us to have more authority than perhaps for other species. So again, knowing what regulations we have or what authority we have for those individual species is important. It also identifies some response options, and that's generally speaking, you can imagine when you're responding to something and you're trying to develop a response plan, a lot of those responses are going to be specific to a particular place wherever they've been introduced. So for instance, when we have a response that's done in a closed system, if we have a fish that shows up in a small private pond that's 1 acre, our response to that is likely going to be different than one that is reported to us that's in a big, large open river or a big, large open lake. So an open system versus a closed system, for instance. So those plans, they provide some generic and general response options on a bigger scale, but we really start tailoring the specific response plan, if you will, and how we're going to actually deal with that particular individual or individuals that have been found based on what the actual environment is around that critter. So those plans have thus far, they've been really valuable to us, again, in kind of dialing in some of those frameworks, if you will, of how we need to start, again, focusing our efforts and who all needs to be involved. And like it says there also, I forgot, and I skipped that one, my apologies, but the partners that are going to be involved in that response potentially. So adjacent states, in some cases, if it's a shared water body, like Alabama or Tennessee, or federal partners as well. So great opportunity through those plans for us to be able to kind of have a little more structure in our response before we actually go out and implement it. Third part of our planning is also obviously grants and actually having funding. A lot of us, I tell people all the time, we love what we do. It's a great job. It's a lot of fun. But obviously, even though we love it, we got to get paid for it. So obviously we have to have funding to be able to go out and do these responses, go out and try to address these issues as we're made aware of them. And so that's where this grant funding comes into play. Most of our funding currently, at least to this point, has come through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in some cases with USGS. And currently we actually have 3 grants that we're working on right now. One is an increased surveillance grant that we've got with USGS and Fish and Wildlife. So the funding is coming through them, but we've also got 2 academic partners that are helping us out in that grant, UGA and then Georgia Gwinnett College. That's a 3-year grant. And what it's allowing us to do is to be able to go out and really survey areas that historically we haven't surveyed before, or we didn't have the funds to survey before. So it's really allowed us to expand our horizon, if you will, in terms of getting out and seeing some new water bodies that we haven't been able to look for invasives before. And if we can find them, perhaps be a little more proactive in dealing with them. Secondly, we've got a grant that was a rapid response grant for aquatic plant control. In this case, it was hydrilla at Reed Bingham State Park. That's one we just actually wrapped up here recently. That was a very it was a competitive grant, but fortunately we were able to get it. But that was a very effective treatment we were able to do there. State Park there, Reed Bingham, deals with a variety of plants. Hydrilla is one, Kabamba is another one. That's fanwort. There's a variety of vegetation issues that it deals with, but that grant allowed us to be able to go out, first and foremost and focus on the hydrilla, but also control some of those other nuisance species that were there plant-wise. And then third, of course, is our ongoing and continuing, if you will, statewide ANS grant. That's our annual grant that we get each year. That essentially funds the non-native catfish work that I'll talk about in just a little bit, along with a lot of our other initial rapid responses that we may do for single introductions that we get informed about. So planning is obviously our first one that obviously we're looking at. And then obviously our next one we're talking about here is prevention. So prevention, as you guys, if you ever deal with prevention, you probably already know this. It's not earth-shattering necessarily, but it's got to start. Prevention has to start if it's going to be effective with legal authority. So for us, we can suggest that people not do this, or we can say, hey, it would be great if people would use good sense and not purchase this or not obtain this animal or not release this animal, whatever. But really, without legal authority, a lot of times suggestions just kind of fall by the wayside. So that's where those rules and regulations really become important to us to be able to really help prevent some of these species from getting out there that we really don't want to see get out there, ones that can have significant biological, ecological, whatever impacts or economic impacts. So that legal authority really helps us to be able to get on the front end of trying to prevent a lot of these ANS issues before they can ever arise, if we can just keep stuff out of people's hands. We recently actually updated several of our ANS laws. We did that back in 2022, and it was a great opportunity for us to kind of go back through historically some of the species that we've either had prohibitions on or ones that we've had severe restrictions on, and update that list, because obviously things change, as you can imagine, through time. The aquarium trade continues to change. What people can buy and bring in through the internet certainly continues to change. So for us, trying to stay on top of that and biologically looking at different critters and what impacts they may have, that allows us to be able to add species, or in some cases potentially delete, but usually just add species to that list that we want to have either, again, prohibited outright for various reasons, or put severe restrictions on where we know where those species are going to be and what hands they're going to be in. Let's get one. There we go. So next up on prevention is obviously education, and this is one that I spend a lot of my time. So to me, I think for prevention, one of the most basic things that you can do with prevention is really try to grab a hold of that next generation and really try to influence them, because I think you're going to have a lot of impact long term from really getting kids at the early stages of life to buy into what you're trying to teach them, what you're trying to tell them, and then they have the ability then to teach and impact their parents and grandparents and other people. So we spend a lot of time doing education efforts around the state, especially the southern half of the state down here where I'm at, but really across the state as well. And really, like I say here, a lot of our goals is to try to educate kids and teachers, certainly teachers alike, but most importantly, kids about ANS, kind of what ANS are, how they impact things ecologically or economically. And again, most importantly, how these kids can help and be involved in trying to help prevent these critters, these plants, whatever they may be, from getting introduced and us seeing the impacts of those introductions. So going out to schools is probably one of our biggest things. There's a variety of ways we do education, but certainly going out to schools so we can actually go to where the kids are, not rely on them to come to us, has been a really impactful thing for us. As I've got there since 2017, we've spoken to over 25,000 kids and adults, and that number continues to grow each year. So really trying to get that message out to a lot of kids, really trying to get them to see it, buy into it, and then tell their friends about it, tell their family about it, so that message continues to grow and spread further and further. In addition to speaking to these kids, obviously we've created a lot of education materials as well. On the far left or on the bottom, you'll actually see that Aquatic Nuisance Species workbook that's teaching kids, never release your pets into the wild. So those are some pretty cool workbooks we've created for both elementary kids as well as middle and high school kids to be able to learn about ANS, what they are, again, the impacts they may have, and then, what those kids can do to help prevent those from happening. Those are interactive workbooks. And again, anytime I think you get kids involved interactively where they're not only learning by reading, but actually learning by doing, doing some activities or whatnot. That seems to be a pretty fun time for them. We've got some travel trunks, kind of after the GSARP, which Kayla's familiar with. Our GSARP group has a travel trunk that's basically an education trunk that has a bunch of different educational tools inside of it. Most of those they can be skins, they can be shells from different invertebrates, they can be mounts, so mounted fish, skulls, whatever they may be. But we've got these different travel trunks with different species or parts of species, if you will, that are invasive to Georgia or nearby states, that we use those travel trunks all around the state. We've got them in each of our regions now across the state so that folks within those regions can actually grab a trunk, take it to a school, and actually have some display items to be able to show kids and have something in hand, and it's not just a picture from a book. And then the last one that really we've enjoyed, and a lot of kids have really enjoyed too, it's been a really valuable tool for us, is this mobile ANS aquarium that you see the pictures of on the bottom. That's as you can see, essentially it's a cargo trailer that we wrapped with a lot of different invasive species that were of significance or importance to Georgia. It's got some messaging obviously on it, and it's a great traveling billboard, to be honest with you, when you're going down the highway. When people see the pictures, they see these big, huge fish on there, they see these big critters on there, and they're obviously drawn to it. And so we get a lot of messaging just through traveling down the road beyond just what, whenever we actually get to our destination and teach the kids or the people there. But the aquarium inside of it, you can see it lit up there in the middle picture. That's been a great tool, again, to actually have live specimens in certain cases. That, again, it's just a great connection for kids and adults alike to be able to see these things live, see what they look like, in some cases actually get their hands on them. It really seems to make the education experience for them that much better and that much deeper. So that's some of our education efforts. Piggybacking on that, outreach is also, again, one of our primary tools that we have. Again, it's a big part of prevention for us. Again, utilizing the public there, trying to get them aware of a lot of our ANS issues, and again, how they can actively participate in that as well. Some of that's done through the signage that we do at boat ramps. The two pictures on the bottom left, the clean your gear and the don't release it here, those are two specific signs that we put up at all of our boat ramps to try to, again, make folks aware of how they can, on the one side for clean your gear, how they can actively, first and foremost, understand and know about how ANS is transported sometimes without them even realizing it, and how they can rectify that or remedy that by simply cleaning their gear, whether it's their boats, their trailers, the boat motors, whatever it may be. That sign addresses that, and really has been a good tool for educating the public about that. The other sign is one that we've really tried to hone in on some of our folks that are wanting to go to docks and go to some of our ramps to release their aquarium fish or to release other sport fish in some cases. Anglers trying to move fish around. So that sign is kind of designed for that. Unless you caught it here, don't release it here. That's been a really good message and good tool there for folks to realize, hey, I know you want to move stuff around and you want to release this. Maybe you don't want this fish back at home anymore. You want it as a pet, but releasing it outside is not the answer. Moving fish from one water body where they're native to one where they're not native, just because you want to catch it closer to home as an angler, is not a good choice. So those signs, again, kind of help address some of those issues and make the public that much more aware. We've also got the ANS rat card that you see in the middle there. That's just an overall general view of ANS in the state. Front and back kind of tells folks somewhat about ANS, but also, again, how they can prevent them. And those are available throughout all of our offices across the state. We're also partnering with a variety of different businesses and other places, tackle stores and different places where folks can pick up those cards and again, learn more about ANS. We've got an online ANS certification that we do now where folks can go online, check out the website you see there, and they can actually become what we call ANS certified. It's a very short 5-minute, maybe 10 at the most, course where folks can, again, learn about ANS. And then when they complete that course, I'll send them a certificate along with some of the education materials that we've talked about, those workbooks and the rat cards and stuff like that, so that, again, we get that message out, and folks have a cool little certificate that they can hang at the house if they so choose. And then also a really big one that's really kind of growing here in popularity in many ways lately has been these outreach tables that we've started partnering with some of our interstate visitor centers. So obviously in Georgia, we've got multiple interstates that go through the state, and there's multiple visitor centers on each of those interstates on the north end and south, or the east and west end. And so we're trying to partner with some of those interstates and set up tables at their visitor centers where obviously you've got a lot of traffic coming in from neighboring states, people just passing through, whatever the case may be, but making those folks aware not only of just ANS in Georgia, but just ANS in general, about how they may be transporting stuff and not realizing it, how they can help prevent moving stuff around or introducing species that may be on their boats or maybe on some other thing they have that they're not even aware they're toting around. So it's a good tool for us to be able to kind of capitalize on a group that's all around the state, that's not even necessarily Georgia folks, it's visitors, to again get that message of ANS out there and really educate folks on what to look for, how to know what they're seeing, and then how to help prevent it in the long run. So planning is again, that was our first one, planning, prevention, and the last one here we'll talk about is response. And these are going to be some case studies, if you will, of there it goes. I'm sorry. So there's two different types of responses that we do. We've got rapid response, and then we've got control or ongoing response. And the difference between the two essentially is, for rapid response, that means we've had a new critter or a new plant, something that's a new ANS species that's just shown up. And so we're trying to implement a rapid response where we're putting a team together and we're responding to that to try to see if we can go figure out if it's just a single individual or a few individuals, or if it's already somewhat established. That guides us obviously in what our next steps are going to be. But that rapid response, more times than not, is something new has shown up. We're going to try to go eradicate it, hopefully get rid of it, and then we can move on. But in certain cases, if things are already established, if they're already well populated there, then we may just implement control or ongoing responses, which means eradication is likely not feasible, but we want to try to control that critter or that plant to whatever extent we can. So we have a team that'll actually do that and go out and implement those long-term control efforts to, again, minimize that critter, that plant, to minimize its impacts on whatever native fish or fauna that are in that area. Like I mentioned earlier, and I can't stress that enough, whatever we do, whether it's rapid response, whether it's control, it's a team. It's a team effort. Again, this is not just one person being able to cover the state. So any boots on the ground, any efforts that we do, whatever, if it's rapid or control, this is a team effort, and one that requires a bunch of us out there. So looking at some of these rapid response, these are going to be some examples of some of the ones that we've dealt with in Georgia, and just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of some of the species and then kind of how we were able to, in some cases, successfully eradicate them, we felt like. In some cases, they're ongoing, but we'll certainly start with one of our most important ones that we've seen in recent years. That was the northern snakehead. So in 2019, we had a call from a private fisherman in a private pond right outside of Atlanta, who called and said, hey, I've just caught this really weird looking fish. I think it may, just looking at it on the internet, looks like it may be a snakehead, but I'm not sure. But I caught it in this private pond and would like to see if you guys can identify it and maybe help me figure out, what we need to do here. So call came to me, came to a different biologist initially. He contacted me, and then I worked with one of our regional biologists there in that Atlanta area to actually go and do a response. He went out, and when they initially went out, essentially, long story short, one of the first steps they did was they did an electrofishing survey in that pond. It was a just under 2-acre pond, so it's a small pond, closed system, very confined. But they did a electrofishing survey in that pond, and sure enough, there were several snakeheads found in the pond. So we knew at that point, obviously, yes, definitely is a snakehead, it's a northern snakehead to be specific. And it wasn't just a single fish, there's multiple ones out there. So at that point, then we began to pursue our eradication effort. We're dealing with a controlled system there, in the sense that it's small, it's closed, and we had the ability through partnering with the landowner there to actually lower the water level, which he worked with us to do. And then once we lowered the water level, we were actually able to do a rotenone application. So we used a pesticide to actually go out and try to kill any snakeheads that were in the water there. Landowner was great to work with, and that's something that I can't stress enough. It's really important, anybody else that might be out there that ever deals with any of these invasive species. Many of our calls come from private landowners, and so it's really important to try to work with them. And more times than not, they're great to not only to work with, but they encourage us to, hey, whatever we need to do, I don't want this on my property, so please help me get it out of there. And so that landowner was great to work with. We did the rotenone application, and in the process, we were able to remove 34 snakeheads from both that pond and then some nearby wetland area as well. Interestingly enough, we had 2 adults and 32 juveniles that comprised those 34 fish. Logically, my brain would say, well, if we had 2 adults and they were male and female, which they were, then those 32 juveniles were offspring of those 2 adults, and maybe we got them all. But interestingly, when we did DNA analysis of the fin clips, those 32 juveniles were not all from those same 2 adults. It was actually a mixture. So we had some of the juveniles were from the female, but not from that male. Some were from the male, but not from that female. So somewhere along the way, while we only found 2 adults during our eradication effort, those 2 adults weren't responsible for all those juveniles solely together, responsible for all the juveniles that were there. So some fish at that point must have escaped prior to us getting there, or we didn't have a complete kill. I'm pretty confident, though, we had a complete kill because we actually, I'm very confident we had a complete kill. So I'm pretty confident what's happened there is that some of the juveniles were from adults that likely had escaped the pond prior to us knowing about it, because again, no telling how long those fish had been in there prior to the fishermen catching them. But nonetheless, we were able to get those 34 out. We were able to completely, I think, eradicate the population in the pond there. Follow-up assessments that were done for 3 years using eDNA, both of the pond as well as upstream and downstream of the wetland area, resulted in no positive detections after that. So we feel confident that we eradicated the ones that were in the pond and in the nearby area. We're not 100% sure whether fish escaped early on and then got downstream or upstream outside of our testing area. If they did, then theoretically there still could be snakeheads in that area, in that watershed, so to speak. But to this point, following this up 3 years later for eDNA sampling plus fisherman sampling, all the way up until this year, we've not had any additional reports. So if they're there, their numbers are extremely low, but we're not sure. Again, pretty confident based on genetics that there was some escapees, but not sure that those escapees either survived or were able to reproduce, beyond that. So jury's still out there, but again, so far, following up on the eDNA detections there, we feel pretty good about that effort, and we're not seeing anything rebound or come back in terms of snakeheads. Another rapid response we've dealt with is for zebra mussels. You guys are probably familiar. Zebra mussels are one of the worst invasives we got across the U.S. And so for us, it's a high priority species. We've not had, knock on wood, any established populations in Georgia, but we've certainly had a few scares. And really one of our first scares, like many other people, was in 2021. We had a nationwide recall on a bunch of moss balls that were sold in pet stores across the nation. Some of those moss balls were infected out in, I think it was Washington or Oregon, so one of the western coast states. And so those moss balls were infected and packaged there and then shipped out to different pet stores, PetSmart, PetSmart and Petco, I think were the 2 major ones across the U.S. And so for us in the state of Georgia, when we heard about that on the nationwide recall, we started developing our response plan, what we were going to do. And a big part of that was actually honing in on those pet stores, developing some relationships with those, and implementing a plan to try to go out and boots on the ground, actually go out and start having people remove some of those products off the shelf, and not only remove them, but we actually did some testing to see if some of those products indeed were contaminated, some of the products that got shipped to Georgia. So we visited, I don't even remember the number now, several dozen pet stores across the state. Again, that was me coordinating and not just solely me at all, but me coordinating a lot of people across the state to go and visit these different pet stores. And long story short, we removed between Petco and PetSmart all the different products that they had that were potentially impacted. And crazily enough, several of them we did find zebra mussels actually in those packages. Not necessarily alive always, but nonetheless they were there. So that was a really good response that we were able to, in many cases, get a lot of those products off the shelf before they could actually get into consumers' hands. So that was really one of our first scares in terms of zebra mussels that we were having to deal with. But in recent years, we're getting more and more of these, not just in the pet store industry like that, but actually out there in the boating world. We've had multiple instances in the last 2 years where we've got some marinas. Thanks to a lot of our education and outreach efforts, they're starting to be more cognizant of what to look for. And so we're getting some of our marina owners now who are calling us saying, hey, we've got this mussel that's attached to the back of this boat, doesn't look right, looks odd, looks weird. So what can you guys do to come identify it or help us be able to figure out what it is and what we need to do about it? And so that's happened multiple times, mostly around Lake Lanier, which is a really important waterway here where we have a lot of boat traffic coming from up north, places like Michigan and Tennessee and a lot of northern states, where folks are bringing boats down where they've got zebra mussels in that state. And so as a result of those marina owners starting to do that, we've developed response and decontamination plans as well and began implementing those. And it's been awesome because we've had 3 instances here in the last year and some change where we've actually had these boats, people call and say, hey, I've got this on the boat, not sure what it is. And then we send a responding crew. They go out, confirm, yes, absolutely, it is zebra mussels. And then we'll do a decontamination of that boat, which fortunately allows us to be able to prevent that from then getting transported into the water. So having these folks aware of what to look for, what these zebra mussels are, the impacts they can have, on Lake Lanier and these other lakes economically, in addition to ecologically, really making the public aware of that and these marina owners aware of that really makes their desire to be more cognizant, be more observant, if you will, makes it a lot easier for us to have those extra eyes out there, and it makes it a lot more effective in terms of preventing this stuff from actually making its way to the water. So those are some examples there of zebra mussels. All right, shifting gears. So plants, obviously critters or animals a lot of times are some of our biggest ANS issues, but certainly plants can be as well. One of those is definitely got to be giant salvinia. Salvinia, so there's 2 types of salvinia that we find in Georgia, common salvinia and giant. Giant is the one that we actually have the most concern with as a state, and it's one that we've actually tried to take the effort when feasible to try to go and respond to it and eradicate it whenever it pops up. So one of the first ones we had here in recent years was in 2015, where a private pond in southeast Georgia, Effingham County, called us up and he had an infestation of it. We had a crew go out and actually eradicate that. And so that was a very successful eradication effort. It has so far, knock on wood, not come back to that pond. And we were doing quite well until this past year when we had another private pond actually just north of me in Appleton County that showed up with giant salvinia all in it. So that's one I've been working on over the last few months. We've got it under control pretty well, but not completely eradicated. That's something we'll continue to work on. But again, all because of these landowners recognizing, hey, this thing doesn't look right. This weed is not one I've seen before. It's not familiar to me. So them recognizing that and then making the calls and then informing us, letting us be able to go identify it and respond to it really has helped in many ways. I think help contain rather some of these things. So that's salvinia. So those are some examples again of rapid response where something was kind of isolated early on in the process, and we actually sent a crew out to respond to it, hopefully with the intention of eradicating it. But like I said early on, sometimes our responses are not just rapid response, but it's more so control efforts where we're going out and we're trying to remove and do some long-term control, if you will, to some extent of things that are already established. And one of the prime examples of that, probably the most commonly known example of that for us, is our Satilla River non-native catfish removal. So flathead catfish are kind of a conundrum in Georgia. I was telling the guy the other day, they're kind of like liver and onions. People around here either love them or hate them. And in Georgia, flatheads are actually, they're native to northwest Georgia. So that's part of the conundrum is you can actually have, and you guys already know this, but you can have a species that's native to certain parts of the state, but not native to all parts of the state. So in northwest Georgia, where they're native, no big issue. But unfortunately, fish have been moved around throughout the state, and one of the places they were moved, unfortunately, was down here in southeast Georgia, where I'm at, in the Satilla River, which is a small blackwater coastal river that historically has been known for its redbreast fishery, redbreast sunfish. So we've had folks travel for many decades, for many, many years, to come down and actually specifically target these redbreast sunfish. They can get well over a pound, some cases pushing 2 pounds. So a really big fishery here that, again, people for generations have really enjoyed and really spent a lot of money coming down in hotels and all that good stuff to target these fish. And then flatheads get introduced into the river in 1996, or give or take around 1996 is when they were first reported to us. And so when flatheads show up, obviously that can have a tremendous impact on things like on any sort of sunfish, redbreast included, a lot of our other native species as well. So in the mid-90s, I think it was around 96, when we first were informed about flatheads in the Satilla, fishermen brought us a fish up, said, hey, we just caught this in the Satilla, not sure what kind of catfish this is. We recognized it obviously as a flathead. Shortly thereafter, we started doing some limited removal efforts. Again, it's in the open system there, so hard to control or eradicate to begin with. Certainly hard to eradicate for sure. Control, not always, but nonetheless, we started doing some removal efforts in 96 on a part-time limited basis. Didn't have funding to do so, so we only did it kind of as we were in that area. We had the funds to do so. But we began those removal efforts there, and pretty quickly early on started realizing this population is growing. It's expanding. They're moving upriver. We're seeing more and more fish. So fortunately, we were able to get funding, but it took right at 10 years to get that funding. But in 2007, we finally had enough funding designated towards that project, towards flathead removal, that we could actually put a full-time crew on an annual basis, several months out of the year, specifically going out trying to remove these fish from the river. So since 2007, we've had that project going with the goal, again, to go out and control to the best of our ability that flathead population to, again, minimize the impacts that they're having both on redbreast as well as many of our other sunfish and native fish species, including sturgeon. We've actually done gut studies and found sturgeon, which is a protected species, in the guts of flatheads. So they can really impact a lot of different fish if given that opportunity. So we did flathead removals for several years, 2007 forward. And unfortunately, flatheads are not the only non-native catfish that are in the river. For many years they were, but unfortunately back around 2010, 11, somewhere in there, blue catfish, a second non-native, were introduced into the river. And so now we're trying to control or deal with 2 species of catfish, both of which can exceed 100 pounds fully grown. So you can imagine the impacts that both of those species can certainly have on a small coastal river. So again, that's what drives a lot of our decision there, a lot of our efforts to try to go and not again eradicate, but control this population as much as we can, suppress it as far down as we can, so that we're minimizing its impacts. To this point, been a very good project. It ebbs and flows in terms of what we're seeing from year to year. On flooded years where we have a lot of high water, flatheads are able to really expand out a pretty good ways, and they're able to, in some cases, get away from us from an electrofishing standpoint, because we're doing removal efforts via electrofishing. So they can actually expand out and get into areas where we can't necessarily electrofish. So that can really hurt us on high water years. But when we get to low water years, like we've had here recently, and in previous years, up till the last 2 or 3 years, we've actually had more high water than low water, but up till that, and in this current time, we've had pretty good low water years. And during low water, those fish really concentrate. We can really hammer them really, really well with that electric fishing gear. So many cases, it's been a very good project. It really has impacted and helped a lot of those native fish species, helped keep them around and help keep them in some cases from probably not necessarily going extinct, but certainly suffering severe decline. So that's a project that we'll do May through November or October/November each year. And I always like to add on that one, if folks are ever interested in tagging along on that, we certainly take folks out. It's a cool way to kind of see what electric fishing for catfish looks like, and also potentially see some big fish along the way. So if you're ever interested in checking that out, at the end there, again, I should have some contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me. All right, so additional efforts. So we do, like I mentioned earlier, we do the rapid response. We've had a few examples of that. The control efforts, the most common one that we do there, again, is that non-native catfish removal, but kind of an area where we're starting to expand a little bit and trying to learn a little bit more and partner up on trying to dial in more and learn more about is some parasite studies, some human health studies that we're doing in partnership with one of our academic universities, Middle Georgia State University up in Middle Georgia. And this is it's a good opportunity for us to partner with them. The professor there that we work with he's a well-known parasitologist. That's his field, if you will, and it allows us to be able to really learn more about some of the parasites that some of these, in this case, snails or eels, which predominantly has been snails, but most recently eels. So how some of these parasites are interacting with these different species, and then how that might be impacting people if people eat those. So the partnership, if you will, it kind of began with him wanting to look at some of the parasites in different invertebrate populations in Georgia. And it so happens that one of the questions we've been wanting to answer for quite some time has been, what kind of parasites are we seeing or potentially seeing in apple snails? We've known through other states and studies they've done that apple snails can carry a lot of different parasites. One of the most important is rat lungworm. And so we've never tested that in Georgia, never have had the ability to be able to really dial in and see if apple snails here carry rat lungworm or carry other types of parasites. But partnering with this professor and the kids there at Middle Georgia State, we've been able to actually dial in on that and really do some pretty cool testing and find some pretty cool results. So in 2024, we provided a lot of apple snails from across the state to Middle Georgia State to test. These are populations that were most predominantly in the southern half of the state where we find them, but they were kind of scattered all around. But then also providing not just apple snails, but some mystery snails that we're finding in the top half of the state, so the northern half of the state. Mystery snails, if you're not familiar with those, Chinese mystery snails and Japanese mystery snails. For Georgia, they're kind of a newer species that historically we haven't really seen a lot of, but in the last 5 years or so, they've really blown up. We're seeing a lot more of them, and we're seeing, obviously, we're confident because we've actually got some cases of it. We're seeing people move them, unfortunately, from one water body to another to introduce them there. Part of that moving effort is because certain populations like to eat mystery snails. And so they're trying to move them and establish new populations so that they can then harvest them for eating. But part of our goal was, again, to learn about these parasites that apple snails may be carrying or that mystery snails may be carrying. So we partnered again with Middle Georgia State here in 2024, gave them a bunch of snails from all around the state to test. And interestingly enough, several came back positive for rat lungworm, whether it was mystery snails or apple snails. So that was actually the first confirmed cases that we had of rat lungworm being found as a parasite in snails in Georgia. It had been found before in rats back in 2019, I believe it was. That was the first that I'm aware of, known case of rat lungworm, that parasite being found in any critter in Georgia. But that was 2019. The Atlanta Zoo found some in the Atlanta area there, but specifically in rats. But this was the first one that we actually found in snails, and that's important for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, we got folks that eat snails, most of the time cooked, but not necessarily always. So, and you don't necessarily have to eat snails in order to get that parasite transferred. It can be transferred just through slime, just through handling the critter, and then actually not washing hands and then ingesting it that way. So, our big concern there was whether people cook them or not. Handling them can be a transmitter as well. So that positive study allowed us to be able to reach back out to our newspapers, to reach out to our media outlets, and be able to get the word out that, hey, eating apple snails or eating mystery snails in this state is not a wise thing. Handling them is not a wise thing, because again, they certainly can carry this parasite along with others that can be really bad, in some cases detrimental to people if ingested. So that was one thing that it allowed us to be able to do. It also allowed us to be able to get out the message that, first and foremost, it's also illegal for people to possess these apple snails and these mystery snails in the state, some of which people didn't necessarily know that. They didn't necessarily know the law. So it allowed us, again, an opportunity to educate folks, make folks aware of the current laws in terms of what they could and couldn't do legally, but also what they should or shouldn't do from a human health standpoint. So that's been a really cool study to this point. It's one that we have ongoing. That same professor and those same students, they're actually working with us now, not just to test apple snails and mystery snails, but also test American eels for some parasites that they may carry as well, because that's another species that I work with. So again, some pretty cool information coming from some of those parasite studies, and really hoping to learn a lot more that, again, we can really advise the public better on what they should or shouldn't do with some of these things. All right, so that's kind of a quick, hopefully, nutshell, 10,000 foot view, if you will. There's a lot more things that obviously we do that I could probably talk about for many hours to come. But I certainly encourage you guys, if you get a chance, to go out and check out our website. There's a lot of information on there. Some examples of A&S across the state that we have either seen or we're encouraging people to be on the lookout for, along with some biological information about those. Like I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity on there for folks to become A&S certified. So I encourage you to go check that out. In completing that certification, you get some free swag, and who doesn't like free swag, right? So everybody likes free stuff. So that's, again, a really good website, I think, to hopefully educate you a little bit more about who we are and what we do, and how you can help partner with us and help prevent some of these introductions from happening. And that's all I've got. So I'll take certainly any questions you have. If you guys are looking at the screen there, those are some posters we've created. Those posters are also available at some of our offices, as well as you can print your own off of our website. Those are just some 2 A&S posters and then a recreational freshwater fish poster of Georgia. Those have all been fairly popular across the state. So again, if you're interested in any of those, feel free to email me, or feel free to swing by your local DNR office, and they should have some hard copies of those. And other than that, we'll open it for questions.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was a great presentation. You really touched on all aspects of your program, and we really appreciate it. Not everybody gets a chance to really hear from managers, state managers. So thank you so much for your time. And I dropped some of the resources that Jim mentioned, including the A&S training link, in the chat here. And so far, we do have one question in the comments, and I encourage everyone, drop your question in the comments, or if you raise your hand with the little at the bottom of your screen there, you'll have the ability under React to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you, and you can ask Jim the question yourself if you'd like. But Diane Hall has said, have you thought about having removal contests for the exotic catfishes, and would that be feasible?
Yeah, so great question. We've tossed around that internally. We've talked about that, putting bounties. There's a variety of ways you could do that. And it's not something that we're going to close the door on. We don't have the ability to do an economic rewards program for a variety of reasons. But we've tossed around maybe having something where, folks can get some other swag or get some sort of other bragging rights, so to speak. But yeah, great question. It's one we thought about. Economically, we don't have the ability to have like a bounty system where we're paying for fish or where we're, paying out a big reward for folks that catch the most fish or whatnot. But certainly something we've continued to toss around.
Yeah, I can imagine something like a lionfish derby, but with giant catfish. That would be that would be a fun event.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Cindy Simpson said, do you provide technical guidance for dam removal sites where invasives could move upstream?
We do. So anytime we're having either dam removals or we're having FERC licenses or any sort of any processes like that that are working with Georgia Power or any of these groups, absolutely, we get solicited our input, whether it's native species impacts or ANS impacts. So yes, we'll definitely work with them on those and provide input there.
And then Quentin Tuckett said, Jim, can you give an update on the Asian swamp eel and pond loach in Georgia?
Yeah, so of course, Asian swamp eels, mostly the ones we've seen predominantly have been around Ollie Creek area, that middle Georgia area. We know there's populations elsewhere, but that's where most of what we've seen in terms of the most established populations have been. We're not doing anything there in terms of removal. That's more of a monitoring effort because most of those populations have been well established for many years. And then regarding weather loach, so weather loach is actually an interesting one. That's one where we're partnering with UGA. They've actually led a lot of those efforts. Again, more so from a monitoring standpoint, because most of those populations that they're finding are pretty well established as well in an open system. But UGA has some, and I'll give them kudos there. They have some great resources. I encourage folks to go check out on weather loach and some of the data that they've collected and the things they've learned from some of their shock and obviously when they find them, they remove them. But both species in many cases, unfortunately, are already established. But we continue to monitor them nonetheless. And if we find them in areas where we feel like we can eradicate them, then we certainly pursue that.
And I wanted to note that for those of you that don't know what the USGS non-Indigenous aquatic species database is, I dropped a link here for the pond loach or weather loach that Jim and Quentin were just talking about. And Jim reports these monitoring efforts to this database, as many states do. So if you are interested in seeing where new populations might show up, or if our eradication efforts, how that's going, you can click that link and go to the different species there. And then we're kind of over time, and I know that others folks might have some questions, but I think that if you maybe find Jim's website, you can see a lot of these resources. And of course, reach out to him if you'd like to help remove catfish from the Satilla River. Jim, would you like to share your contact in the comments here?
Sure, yeah, I'll do that. And I apologize, I didn't put it at the end of the presentation there. That was my fault.
Oh, no worries. This is going on YouTube too. So, if you don't want your email everywhere. So everybody else who's still on this will be this will be put on YouTube. So if you missed any part of it or you want to share it with a colleague, it'll be there. Check in the next couple of days on the Southeast Risk listserv. Jim, thank you so much. He just dropped his email in the chat. So if you are interested or have any more questions for Jim, thank you very much for your time. And we really appreciated your overview. And thank you to everyone who joined today.
I appreciate the opportunity again. Thank y'all.
All right. And we'll see you all soon. Bye.